Good day everyone! Today we're going to discuss the topic architecture. But first, let's have the objective. First is to define architecture. Outline historical trace of architecture and its significant architectural designs. Explain the theories and types of architecture. Discuss architectural planning, and last is identify the notable Filipino architects. Let us first discuss what is architecture. Architecture is the process or profession of designing buildings and their environments. Architecture also refers to the product of this design and work. The root of the word architecture is the Greek architecton, master builder, which makes sense because the ancient Greeks were very skilled at architecture. Think of all those columns and stadiums and temples. Next, let us discuss the outline historical trace of architecture and its significant architecture designs. Let's start with prehistoric architecture. Prehistoric builders moved earth and stone into geometric forms, creating our earliest human-made formations. Humans constructed earthen mounds, stone circles, megaliths, and structures. Prehistoric architecture includes monumental structures such as Stonehenge, cliff dwellings in the Americas, and thatch and mud structures. Next is the ancient Egyptian architecture. This architectural style ranges from 3050 BC to 900 BC. It depicts the prominent period of Egyptian architecture. The Egyptians cheated the most impressive structures of the ancient world. The period saw the construction of some of the prominent pyramids with several noticeable architectural characteristics. The ancient Egyptians didn't use mortar, so the stones were carefully cut to fit together. Next is the classical architecture. Classical architecture refers to the style and designs of buildings in ancient Greece and ancient Rome. Classical architecture shaped our approach to building in Western colonies around the world. The most important architectural feature which highlights this style is the column placed on the facade. The identifiable features of classical aesthetic include symmetry, proportion, rational order, the relationship of individual parts to the whole, and calm logic. Next is the early Christian architecture. The early Christian architecture started in two prominent locations, centered at Rome and Constantinople. Early Christian architecture at Rome was influenced by and was the logical outcome of existing Roman architecture. Columns and other architectural features and marbles from the older buildings were worked into the design of new basilican churches of the Christians. Next,
good day everyone, my name is Joanna Marie Mabayamba. So for today, we're going to discuss the four theories of architecture. So first is rational, technological, and constructional. So one of the example in rational in architecture is ensuring that the layout of building allows of efficient circulation and function use of the space. So the second is material, economic, and social. So material aspect of architecture is the use of sustainable and environmentally friendly materials such as recycled, concrete, or reclaimed wood to reduce the environmental impact of a building. The third is religious, cultural, and philosophical. Religious aspect of architecture is the design of a mosque with a specific features and elements that reflect Islamic belief and practices such as the use of domes and prayer halls. The last is the spirit of age on. For example, in the modernist era, The spirit of the age emphasize simplicity functionally and the rejection of ornamentation, leading to the development of minimalist and industrial inspired architecture. In a postmodernism, embraced diversity, historic references, and blending of the different architectural styles reflecting the spirit of the age. So that's all. Thank you.
My topic it's all about type of architect. First is residential architect will often work on developers and home building companies, such as when a developer is building a large housing development, the residential architect will plan and design the houses with the development's specification. The second is commercial architects, which specialize in a particular type of projects such as hotels or bridges, which allows them to become a specialist in their field. So these types of architect typically work with business rather than people work or large scale project that tend to be very lucrative. The third is landscape architects must consider the design of pathways as well as considering the impacts on other public spaces connecting to the area they are working on such as traffic. So the challenge of this type of architecture often comes from the vast land to be designed and built and the benefit to the people who will use in the end. Fourth is interior designs will also have extensive knowledge of function and feels of the materials incorporated in design such as fabric and furniture. The fifth is the urban design architect on challenge of building for a much larger space such as an entire block of house or whole town. The urban design architect will need to have a keen eye for the urban space they are working with the end of know how to incorporate features such as trees and shrubbery. The sixth is sustainable building and design. The types of architect considers how a building or landscape design can negativity impact the environment and works to reduce this this green design architect build homes as well as commercial properties. The last is industrial architects. Focus on building facilities fit for industrial purposes such as factories, retail units, or MOT, testing centers, and government buildings. So these architects works closely with companies to build functional properties for this their purpose. So the industrial architects know that get the most out the space they are working with an functional level, but there is also different styles such as brutalist architect.
Now let's move on to architectural planning. What is architectural planning? Architectural planning is essential in creating buildings and structures that are functional, aesthetically pleasing, and environmentally sustainable. It involves carefully considering factors such as the site location, budget constraints, client preferences, and building codes to design spaces that meet the needs of users. Architects focus on optimizing space, ensuring structural integrity, and incorporating sustainable practices to create successful and safe buildings. The architectural planning process sets the foundation for the design and construction phases, guiding the project towards a successful outcome that balances aesthetic, functionality, and environmental considerations. The importance of architectural planning. The importance of architectural planning can be seen in the designs of hospitals. Architectural planning ensures that hospitals are laid out in a way that optimizes workflow for medical staff, provides comfortable and healing environments for patients, and accommodates advanced medical technology. By carefully planning the layout, room sizes, and access to natural light, architects can create spaces that enhance patient care, improve staff efficiency, and promote a healing environment for all who enter the facility. Good architectural planning in hospitals can contribute to better patient outcomes, improve staff satisfaction, and overall better functioning of the healthcare facility. Next is the Romanesque architecture. Romanesque is inspired by what is Romanesque Roman architecture. Similarities between Roman and Romanesque include round arcs, stone materials, and the basilica style plan used for secular purposes by the Romans, combining features of contemporary Western Roman and Byzantine buildings. Romanesque architecture is known by its massive quality, its thick walls, round arcs, sturdy piers, groin vaults, large towers, and decorative buildings. Byzantine architecture. Byzantine architecture is a style of building that flourished under the rule of Roman Emperor Justinian between AD 527 and 565. In addition to extensive use of interior mosaics, its defining characteristic is heightened dome, the result of the latest 6th century engineering techniques. Early Byzantine architecture was built as a continuation of Roman architecture. Next is the Gothic architecture. Gothic architecture began mainly in France, where architects were inspired by Romanesque architecture and the pointed arcs of Spanish Moorish architecture. It evolved from Romanesque architecture and was succeeded by the Renaissance architecture. It's easy to recognize Gothic buildings because of their arcs, ribbed vaulting, flying buttresses, elaborate sculptures, and stained glass windows. Gothic architecture was originally known as French style. Renaissance architecture. Renaissance architecture is originated in Italy and superseded the Gothic style over a period generally defined as 1400 to 1600. Features of Renaissance building include the use of the classical orders and mathematically precise ratios of height and width, combined with a desire for symmetry, proportion, and harmony. Next is the Baroque architecture. The Baroque style is reflected in opulent and dramatic churches with irregular shapes and extravagant ornamentation. In France, the highly ornamented Baroque style combines with classical restraint. Elements of the elaborate Baroque style are found throughout Europe. Russian aristocrats were impressed by the Palace of Versailles, France, and incorporated Baroque's ideas in the buildings of St. Petersburg. Elements of the elaborate Baroque style are found throughout Europe. Next is the Rococo architecture. Rococo art and architecture is characterized by elegant decorative designs with scrolls, vines, shell shapes, and delicate geometric patterns. Rococo perfectly reflected the decadent indolence and the degeneracy of the French royal court and high society. Unlike other major architectural movements, like Romanesque, Gothic, or Baroque, Rococo was really concerned with interior design. This was because it emerged and remained centered in France, where rich patrons were unwilling to rebuild houses and chateaux, preferring instead to remodel their interiors. And the style was far too whimsical and light-hearted for the exteriors of religious and civic buildings. Next is the Roman architecture. Romans mainly utilized the Greek classical orders, but also created a new composite order, which was used in the Arc of Titus. Domes, vaults, aediculae, small shrines designed as small temples, and coffers were also popular elements of classical and imperial Roman architecture. Roman architecture is characterized by two elements: These are the use of the dome as a recurring structure in the construction of temples and construction of fora or public squares. These two elements can be seen in the design of the Temple of Venus and Roma and in the Forum of Trajan. Greek architecture. The Greek Revival was an architectural movement of the late 18th and 19th centuries, predominantly in Northern Europe and the United States. Ancient Greek architecture is best known for its temples, many of which are found throughout the region, with the Parthenon regarded, now as in ancient times, as the prime example. Most remains are very incomplete ruins, but a number survive substantially intact, most outside modern Greece. Next is the Art Nouveau. Known as the new style in France, Art Nouveau was first expressed in fabrics and graphic designs. The style spread to architecture and furniture in the 1890s as a revolt against industrialization turned people's attention to the natural forms and personal craftsmanship of the arts and crafts movement. Art Nouveau buildings often have asymmetrical shapes, arcs, and decorative Japanese-like surfaces with curved, plant-like designs and mosaics. Next is Neo-Gothic. In the early 20th century, medieval Gothic designs were applied to modern buildings. Both private homes and the new type of architecture called skyscraper. Neo-Gothic skyscrapers often have strong vertical lines and a sense of great height. Arched and pointed windows with decorative tracery, gargoyles, and other medieval carvings and pinnacles. And the last is the modern architecture. Modern architecture is the architectural style dominated the Western world between the 1930s and the 1960s and was characterized by an analytical and functional approach to building design. Buildings in the style are often defined by flat roofs, open floor plans, curtain windows, and minimal ornamentation. It was also known as International Modernism or International Style. After an exhibition of modernist architecture in America in 1932 by the architect Philip Johnson, the style became characterized by an emphasis on volume, asymmetrical composition, and minimal ornamentation.
Good morning everyone. So my topic is about famous architecture international. Number 1 is Frank Gehry. Gehry has designed a number of iconic buildings including the Bilbao Green Wheel, the Walt Disney Concept Hall, and the Bay Museum in Panama City. And these have become world-renowned attractions in their own right, often bringing tourists and money into an area. So, the design of the buildings follows the style of Frank Gehry, inspired by the shape and textures of a fish. It can be considered a sculpture, a work of art in itself. The forms do not have any reason nor are governed by any geometric law. Gehry is now regarded as the most significant North American architect of this era. Number 2 is Frank Lloyd Wright. Frank Lloyd Wright became famous as a creator, the expander of organic architecture. His praise indicating buildings that harmonize with their inhabitants and their environment. The boldness and fertility of his invention and his command of space are probably his greatest achievements. So, there are 3 examples of achievements of Frank Lloyd Wright. Number 1 is Taliesin Wish, Falling Water, Robbie House. That is an example. Frank Lloyd Wright, the most famous architect in the U.S. design and structure in Oregon, the Gordon House, which is the only Wright residence open to the public in the Pacific Northwest. Guided tours of the interior of the 2-story house with decorated and geometric work and walls of glass rising 12 feet to to the ceiling are offered throughout the year. Number 3, Norman Foster. Norman Foster gained fame in the early 1970s as the architect of the Wills Faber and Domus headquarters in Ipswich, England, an eco-friendly open-plan building that was radical for its time. So there are example of Norman Foster. So number 1 is Hearst Tower, the Bond Finance Center. So that is one of example. So the architecture design by him had an intense sense of the times and are much environment friendly. Meanwhile, Norman Foster commonly combined the buildings which with place spirit and traditional culture so that he could make them harmonious, organically use and become a future of city sceneries line. Number 4, Santiago Calatrava. Santiago Calatrava, born July 28, 1951, Binamimit, near Valencia, Spain, Spanish architect widely known for his sculptural bridge and buildings. Calatrava studies in architectures at the Polytechnic University of Valencia, Spain, from which he graduated in 1974. The following year, he began a course in structural engineering at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology. So there are example of Calatrava. Milwaukee Art Museum, Museum of Tomorrow. And that is an example. In his architectural commission, Calatrava used his knowledge of engineering to create innovative sculptural structures, often in concrete and steel.
Hi everyone, my name is Connie Marie Rosario, and now we will talk about the local architects here in Mindanao. The first architect that we will talk about is a young modern Filipina. So, it is rather unusual for her to be interested, at this rate fascinated by the ornate Mindanao design. Because as we all know, most of the designs and architecture here in Philippines is inspired from Spanish and American colonial era. So it is perhaps to take time and to take another route and try on a distinct style dominated by Filipino architectural features. So she is quite unique. She is known for buildings designs inspired by Mindanao culture, and her name is architect Glory Rose Dai Mitalia. A University of the Philippines Mindanao architect graduate, has the passion for locally designed structures. Studying in Mindanao gave her the opportunity to get in touch with indigenous groups and their rich art and culture. Her designs are characterized by Mindanao and Muslim elements such as Maranao Ukir, Bagubo Tagabawa, and Tibuli fabric. So the next architect that we will talk about is Felino June A. Palafox Jr. He is a Filipino architect, urban planner, and he is the principal architect, urban planner, and founder of Palafox Associates. He obtained his bachelor's degree in architecture from University of Santo Tomas. And one of his design is the Cotabato City Grand Mosque, also known as Sultan Haji Hassan al-Bolkiah Masjid. This mosque now stands as the largest mosque in the country and also in the Southeast Asia.